Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Neptune Sunday. It's your boy V Moss here with a special guest. I'd like to welcome Dr. Marcus Collins to the show. Marcus, what's up, man?
Man, I am all smiles and I'm stoked to be here. So thanks so much for having me.
Yes. So introduce yourself to the people, man. Let them know a little bit. This is going to be a fun conversation, but let's set it up. Tell them who you are.
What up? So my name is Marcus. I'm a product of Detroit. I always start there because I feel like that's where I got my start. I had the fortunate pleasure of having my feet in two different worlds. I'm the world of academia. I'm a professor at the Ross School of Business, University of Michigan, but I'm also a practitioner. Most recently, the head of strategy at Wieden Kennedy, New York, which you probably know from doing work like Just Do It for Nike. It's been our founding client, our longest standing client. But most recently, all the game-changing work you've seen from McDonald's has come from us. So I get to put ideas in the world as an advertiser, and then put people in the world as an academic. So I feel like I have the dopest job ever. Just shy of 2 months ago, I launched my first book called For the Culture: The Power Behind What We Buy, What We Do, and Who We Want to Be. That I think is an amalgamation of all the experiences that I've had as a practitioner, a distillation of all the knowledge that I've been able to acquire, and really drive at the power of culture and what it means, not only for consumption, but day-to-day life writ large.
So gotta shout out that you're the second Wieden Kennedy guest we've had. Shout out to the homie Trayvon Edwards, who was on.
Oh, that's right. That's my dude. That's my guy. Trey's
Yeah.
my guy.
Yeah, Black Trey. That was a great conversation that we had. So you talked a little bit about the book. Talk about what you really want people to take away from it.
Yeah. So, the book makes a very clear argument. I think clear. It's definitely an argument that most people can follow. It's that there's no external force more influential to human behavior than culture. And when you hear that, people go, yeah, totally, absolutely. Then you go, great, define culture. And when you do that, you get a whole lot of Homer Simpson blank stares, right? You ask 5 people to define culture, you get 35 different answers. And that's a problem if you have a vested interest in getting people to adopt behavior, because culture is the biggest driver in everything that we do in our day-to-day lives. So if we don't understand culture to a degree that we can harness the mechanisms that make it work, then we leave ourselves unable to leverage its power, right? So we need a better Rosetta Stone to describe what culture is, so that we might be able to use it in our day-to-day lives as practitioners, or navigate it better as citizens of this planet that we cohabitate. So the book provides that perspective. Well, what is culture? It provides language for us to describe culture, Rosetta Stone, to talk about it. And then it provides skills. So if this is what culture is, this is the impact that it has on us. Now, how do we leverage that as practitioners and the like? So the book unpacks that, borrowing from case studies from my work, from some of the work that I think is the most inspiring case studies, not only in marketing, but in politics and in policy, right? The book, it's not a marketing book, it's a people book.
Right.
I look at it through a marketing lens because I am a marketer, but the target for this is anyone with a vested interest in getting people to adopt behavior. So whether you're an advertiser, a marketer, an entrepreneur, a manager, a leader, a politician, an activist, clergy, and everything in between, if you have that vested interest in getting people to move, then this book is for you for sure.
For sure. And I definitely appreciate it from that perspective of being a marketer myself, but also as being someone who is, interested in other things that are of the culture, and understanding how those things can be affected by marketing, or also can help me in my role as a marketer. So I'm really excited to, once I stumbled up, got connected with you on social and saw the book, I was excited to get it. So enjoy. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm enjoying it so far. Lots of nuggets in there. So the question I want to ask is, the title is For the Culture. Obviously that's a title a slogan, a phrase that we hear a lot. What does that really mean to you? So when someone says something is of the culture or the culture, what does that really mean?
Yeah, so it's definitely a double entendre. And it's meant to be packed with lots of meaning. And so let's start with the phrase itself. So the phrase entered the vernacular thanks to a gentleman by the name of Sean Carter, who we know as Jay-Z. He says the line in Hova, Izzo, H-O-V-A, I do this for my culture. And as a result of that phrase being uttered in the cultural production of that song, it's become a part of the hip hop vernacular and the dominant Black culture as well, right? I do this for my culture, I'm doing it for the culture. So you raised the right point, Vaughn. So what does that mean? Well, first we have to define culture. What is culture? I look at culture through a Durkheimian lens. Emil Durkheim, one of the founding fathers of sociology, He talks about culture as a system of conventions and expectations that demarcate who we are and what people like us do, right? They're expectations of what people like us do. And if you take that a little bit further, maybe a century and a half further, or maybe a little less than a century and a half, a century further, a gentleman by the name of Raymond Williams is one of the founding fathers of cultural studies. He talks about this culture really being a system of systems that's anchored in our identity, who I am. Because of who I am, I see the world a certain way. I have a certain set of beliefs and ideologies, right? Truths and stories about the world. And because of these lenses by which I see the world, I show up in the world accordingly. I dress a certain way, artifacts. I behave a certain way. These are social norms, unwritten rules. And then I speak a certain way, language. And because of who I am, I see the world a certain way. I show up in the world a certain way through a shared way of life. And then I express my cultural subscription through production, through cultural works like literature, music, film, art, dance, and brands and branded products. They become ways in which I express who I am, but also they reflect what people like us ought to do, right? I grew up watching Spike Lee movies, listening to hip hop, and watching The Cosby Show before we knew that Bill Cosby was a dirtbag. And as a result, I have a certain idea of what race relations are because of Spike Lee. I have a certain aesthetic of what cool is because of hip hop. And I have a certain idea of what good parenting is beyond my parents because of The Cosby Show. Right. So these cultural works not only are expressions of what people like me do, they also reflect what people like me ought to do. And the alchemy of these systems is our culture. So when Jay-Z says, I do this for my culture, what he's saying is that what he does, that is the cultural production that he puts in the work, puts into his work and puts into the world, he does it for people who see the world the way he does, who subscribes to the same cultural identity, who sees the world through similar cultural lenses, who express their cultural expression through a shared way of life and through cultural production. I end the book, not like it's a, this isn't like a spoiling the movie for you, but it's not a spoiler alert. But I end the book, with that phrase. I open the book with the phrase, I end the book with that phrase, because the idea is that, we're all doing it for our culture, right? There are many, 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 many cultures. And we subscribe to multiple cultures, right? Like I'm a Collins, that's a familial group that I'm a part of, Marcus Collins. And there are cultural conventions and expectations that govern what people like me do. I'm also a Michigan Wolverine, right? Therefore, there are expectations and conventions of what people like me do. I subscribe to hip hop culture. As a result, there are expectations and conventions that people like me do, right? So every day that we show up and take place into this phenomenal social world we live in as social actors, we are doing it for the culture. And Jay-Z just provided just beautiful language, as he always does, for us to talk about it in a really concrete way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everyone always talks about how there's a Jay-Z quote for every situation.
That's actually a really good thesis, and I would not be surprised. It's like there's a Bible verse for everything, and there's a Jay-Z quote for everything.
For sure. And I think another part of it, like just to speak a little bit more about the Jay-Z quote, is being for the culture and doing things for the culture is not just about who you are and like how you're supposed to act and who you represent, but I think something that's important to that line and that phrase, that bar, like that sequence of the song is like he's talking about putting on for the culture to help elevate it, right? To help like remind people that may not be familiar with it, here's what we do. Here's why I'm doing this. He's representing the culture because he's elevated to a space that I think that's part of the conversation too, is, when you get to a certain level, you have that responsibility to represent the culture in a way that's authentic to you and the culture that you represent, for sure.
That's right. As a cultural producer, he definitely has a responsibility to ensure that what he puts into the world is congruent with the community, but also ensure that the new things that he contributes to the cultural characteristics of the group, the social facts that govern what it means to be a part of this group, steers us in the right directions, right? And Jay has, always been that way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He's like, Jay so cracked, so you don't have to do that, right? Like this is,
Right.
like that.
Right.
That is responsible cultural production, right?
For
So
sure.
he says, I do this for my culture, and he's putting on for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So, in addition to Jay-Z, you've also had the opportunity to connect and work with some other big heavy hitters in the music industry, Steve Stoute and Beyoncé. Just talk a little bit about that work, some of those experiences and how that's kind of affected your perspective on how important the culture can be in this space and moving the economic side of it.
Oh yeah. So I mean, of course, working with Beyonce was unbelievable. I mean, it's really the only way I could describe it because it's so rare that you get to meet someone, let alone work with someone, and contribute to the output of someone that operates at the highest fidelity possible. Like not just her stardom, not just her celebrity, but it's her work ethic and her work product. It's like, goodness gracious, like I get to contribute to this. I mean, I worked at Apple, and I consider Apple and Beyonce to be in the same stratosphere when it comes to excellence, right? And I got the chance to put like one small brick on the edifice that is Beyonce's queendom. But then Stoute is a special one because I worked with Beyonce for a year and a half, and I worked with Stoute for 4 years. And I really cut my teeth working with Stoute at Translation, his advertising agency, which ironically was co-founded with Jay-Z and Jimmy Iovine. But Stoute taught me how to think about culture as a vehicle, not only a vehicle for consumption, but a vehicle for collective behavioral adoption. And he wouldn't describe it that way. It wasn't his language as much, but the idea of pushing culture forward, as he would describe it, to me, it's really kind of became the cheat code for what marketers or practitioners writ large. So think about when we try to engage in culture, right? The brands that lead culture are more successful than the ones who follow. Right. And by leading culture is that you're contributing to the social facts. You contribute to the conventions and expectations of the group of people through new language, like Jay-Z. He's a cultural producer. He pushes culture forward, i.e., he contributes to culture in a meaningful way. And it just took these things that were abstract and it helped me see them in a tangible way. And what I think academia provided me was language to describe what I've observed, what I've known maybe intuitively, right, innately, inherently. Never had the language, so I don't think I had as much of a command on it that once I got the language from academia. But Stoute, he really provided the stage for me not only to observe these things in action, but actually participate in them and put things in the world that made a dent in culture and commerce.
Yeah, for sure. In the book, you talk a little bit about helping Steve Stoute and helping Jay-Z with, getting made in America. Like, talk a little bit more about that. Cause I live in Philly now. I went to the one in 2017 when Jay-Z performed, but just being able to see how big of a deal that whole thing is. Like, talk a little bit about how you guys got that going. And
it's hard for me to talk about it without getting emotional. Just because how often do you get a chance to touch something that's so long lasting and has such a massive impact on such a large swath of people? So when I joined Translation, I was still working at his agency, and it doesn't exist anymore, so I can say the name. It was an agency called Big Fuel, pure play social media agency. And thank God for them, because I learned not only about the industry of advertising, but I learned a lot about social. I learned everything I knew about social at the time from Big Fuel, which set me up for this gig with Translation and Stoute to not only build their social practice, but lateralize it across all their clients. And I got a phone call from Stoute maybe a week before I was supposed to start. Yeah, I think it was about a week before I first started. So I just gave notice, and I get an email from their president and chief strategy officer. Says, "Hey, we got this pitch in the works, and like, man, I think we could really benefit from your thinking. Like, I know it's kind of it's maybe not the easiest thing to ask. It's a little awkward for us because like you're still working at a place and you don't start with us till next week or whatever. But we love your thinking." And I was like, "Oh man, I appreciate that. I would love to jump in it, but like I just gave these guys notice. Like that wouldn't be fair to them." They go, "Okay, cool. Sorry, we just had to ask. We totally get it. It's all good." I'm like, "All right, cool." Like that was like I appreciated them reaching out because I felt like, oh, okay, like like they want me there. This is great. And then I get a text message from Stoute. And Stoute goes, "Yo, can you talk?" And I'm like, "Yeah, what's up, Stoute? What up? What up?" Just like literally like the same day, I get on the phone with Stoute, and he's like, "Yo, you mean to tell me you can't do this thing for us? And I was like, I mean, if you need me to, he was like, yeah, I need you to. I need you there. And here's the thing. And he basically lays it out. He goes, hey, man, like Budweiser has been spending ridiculous sums of money on music for decades. And in the 70s, 80s, maybe early 90s, but 70s, 80s, man, they did this thing called the Superfest, produced by Al Heyman. He's a longtime legendary music guy. And they used to book like Aretha Franklin, the Jackson 5, Stevie Wonder, like the biggest of biggest of biggest. They used to sell out like stadiums, like Wrigley's Field. It's unbelievable. But by the end of the 90s, especially in the 2000s, it had lost its luster, right? And it was now like a traveling sort of tour thing. It just wasn't to the fidelity that they wanted. And it felt like, this investment they were making wasn't reaping the benefits that it once did and what they aimed to do. And Stoute's like, nah, man, we got to do something different. I have an idea. And I think Jay's on board. He's like, we should do a music festival. And I go, interesting. Okay. And I started to think about, all right, well, how do you, not like reverse engineer it, but that's a good idea on how to rethink music, but why Budweiser? So we started thinking about this thing. All right, well, here's Budweiser. This is like Americana brand. Like it's like Levi's, Marlboro, Coca-Cola, Budweiser. I don't know if it gets any more Americana than that. It's like, okay, here's a brand. It's all about Americana-isms, but its view of Americana is still flag bearing. I'm proud to be an American. At least I know I'm free. And that was not representative of the new Americana, right? The new Americana, we smoke marijuana. It's a different landscape that they were completely missing. It's like, oh, well, there's some contemporizing that needs to happen, and how the brand views the Americana aesthetic. And then it was like, okay, all right, cool. So why a music festival beyond the fact that they had this one thing and this is making it more contemporary? It's like, well, today's youth, I'll say with massive air quotes, because that's where they had the biggest anemia in the market. Like they said, one in three millennials at the time, which I hate generationalism, but I use that as a shorthand, had never tasted a Budweiser. It's like, what? Like that is problematic for the brand. And it's like, okay, well, we got some work to do. So we say, all right, so people are listening to music differently, right? They listen to it on shuffle, right? They live life on shuffle. It's very diverse, the way they live life, and their music consumption is diverse likewise. That's interesting. Okay, so that makes sense for a festival to do that. Cool. Well, then what's the lens for this festival for Budweiser? Well, this new Americana, while they're not flag-waving patriots in this way, they do believe in the American dream. And the American dream is that no matter where you're from, if you have an idea and you can bring it to life, you can manifest it, you can make it here. It's like that. Now that is something very interesting. So we said, okay, we're going to do a festival, right? A contemporary music experience. And we're going to do it through the lens of Americana, because that's what this brand is all about, but a contemporary sense of Americana that is celebrating the dream, the American dream, that no matter who you are, where you're from, you can make it here if you have an idea and can manifest it. Well, who's the best exemplar of that? Jay-Z. Like, span from Marcy Projects to billionaire status. Wasn't a billionaire then, but he's a billionaire now. Like right. This guy, he is the manifestation. He is the personification of the American dream. And plus, we know the guy, so like that makes it for an easy thing. So the idea was that we're going to name this festival Made in America, and the festival was going to take place in the most Americana location in the country. It's Philadelphia, right? The Declaration of Independence was signed there. The Liberty Bell is there. Like it doesn't get more Americana than that. But I will say this is an inside one. I did put this in the book. Our first recommendation was to do the festival in the middle of the country, like find the coordinates that was the right middle of the country. And that's where the festival is going to be held. But it was going to be a logistics nightmare. So we went with Philadelphia. Like, does it get more Americana than that?
The middle of the country's got to be like what? In like Nebraska, Oklahoma?
It's like, I think it's like right around Kansas. It's like it's like nowhere. It's like nowhere. And it's nowhere you could have done this thing, man. You couldn't get power or anything. It wasn't going to happen. It was a fanciful idea. But doing it in Philly and calling it Made in America just made all the sense in the world. And it was going to be curated by Jay-Z, and it was going to be reflective of the diverse palette of makers that exist and the diverse palette of consumers that want this content. And there's a line from Frank Ocean that I used to use to reference this. I met her at Coachella. She went to go see Z-Trip. I went to see Jigga. Perfect, right? So it was like I can see the Hives, and then Gnarls Barkley, and then Odd Future, and then D'Angelo, and then Drake, and then Jay-Z, and then the next night I see Pearl Jam, and it was the perfect distillation of the American music palette. And the festival is entering its 12th year of existence now. And you just don't, campaigns don't run that long. Ads definitely don't run that long. But this is something more than that. It's more than a platform. This is cultural production. So I can say, I did this for the culture.
Definitely, it's such a dope event. Like you said, all the different people, the diversity that's there. Like, one thing that I loved when I went in 2017 was just the fact that Mitchell and Ness is headquartered here, and they had an installation at the festival. So I just see all these suburban white kids walking around all these sick throwback jerseys. And I'm like, yo, what is happening right now? But I was like, yo, this is exactly what this is all about, though. And I loved every moment of it. It was dope. Being able to see my fun story about it is, and it's actually related to you and your connections to Beyonce, right? So one of my best friends in the world, Justin Tinsley, he went to Hampton with me, went to Georgetown with me, and he's on ESPN. He's writes for Landscape. And so he and I went together, and he got we get in, he had to go to the media entrance. So I'm just I'm solo. He says, I got to go get my media pass, but I'll catch up with you. He connects with Elliott Wilson because at the time, Danielle, Elliott's wife, was was basically Justin's boss at ESPN.
Okay.
He's cool with Elliott, and so he's like, okay, cool. I'm talking to Elliott, but I'll catch up with you. And hours kept passing, right? He's like, yo, Elliott's got me in the Rock Nation tent. I'm like, bro, do your thing, man. Don't feel like you gotta come leave the Rock Nation tent. He told me about how Elliott introduced him to Jay, and Jay is like, oh yeah, you the young boy. Oh yeah, Elliott told me about you. I was like, yo, he sends me a picture. I don't even know if I should say this. He might get in trouble. But he basically told me a story about how he said something just to the room, and he made a joke, and Beyonce laughed. And he's like, yo, I made Beyonce laugh. And I was like, bro, dog. So this, yo, listen, don't even come out here. Just stay, hang out. You're not gonna hurt my feelings, man. Yeah. But yo, super proud of Justin. That's my guy for life. Yo, talk to him almost every day. But again, just those are the type of moments, that thing that was at the time. Solange performed at that Saturday night.
Yeah.
So it was dope, a dope event.
I mean, it was super killer was that the inaugural, that's in 2012, the inaugural launch of Made in America. We had Ron Howard do a documentary on Showtime. It was the first time Ron Howard ever did a documentary that archived the stories of the impact of Made in America on the city. It's just so rare that you get to make a dent in the world in that way. And look, there are so many people who touched it. It wasn't just my own thought trust, not by any stretch. So many people who touched it, and just to be able to, I was a part of the pitch team. It was 5 of us in a hotel room in St. Louis at 2 in the morning before we pitched this thing the next morning to Budweiser. And just to be a part of it it's a really special thing, man. You don't get those opportunities very, very often.
So one thing that comes up in the book is, just how important religion and faith is to your family. You talked about that being one of the key characteristics of your tribe, the Collins tribe. Just kind of talk about what that has meant to you growing up in the space, but also, the commonalities you see between the moving of people and how that whole impact of how you're trying to move people is related to marketing and also kind of religious leaders as well.
Oh yeah. When I was writing the book, actually, it took me a minute or two. By minutes, I mean like 2 months or so, 3 months even, to really understand the book I was trying to write. It was easy. I say easy for me. It seemed like a very clear path to just regurgitate what the scholars before me had written, because they're a million times smarter than I am. Just kind of regurgitate it and then just add new frames to talk about it. And I didn't feel like it was like my book. It's like, how do I write something that felt like it was me and I'm the only person that could write it? And I struggled with that for a little while. And so I started thinking about like, well, how did people start studying culture when it first began? It's like, oh, of course, the early sociologists, Durkheim, Weber, Marx, these guys studied culture by observing religion. I go, oh, I'm a church boy. Like, dude, like born and raised in the church. I'm the choir director of my church. I direct the kids' choir at a national level. Like, oh, fam, I can write that book. And they're like, all right, bet. So I'm gonna look at culture through a religious lens. It's like, well, dang, does it make the book a religious book now? Oh, I don't know. Now I'm wrestling with this. And then I'm like, well, then I'll add like the marketing lens to it because I'm a marketer. That makes a whole bunch of sense. And then when I started to write, it began to flow very, very naturally in that if I used the religious language that we already use when we talk about marketing as a way to anchor what the arguments are here about culture, it became so clear. It's like, oh my goodness, like, well, what is religion? Religion, the etymology means to bind, right? And more contemporarily, it means to commit. So we say, oh, Vaughn does that religiously, like he's committed to that. Okay, cool. So we think about our cultural subscriptions, we are committed to it, right? If you're in a fraternity, that's a lifelong thing, especially if you're in a historically Black Greek letter organization, right? Like you're committed to it, right? Like your identity markers, you are committed to it, right? Try to get an Apple guy to rock a Samsung phone, ain't happening, right? Try to get someone who is like committed to Nike to wear Adidas. It ain't happening, man. They're like, yo, checks over stripes all day long. So it's like religion becomes a really nice frame to talk about culture like those other guys did, right? The Durkheim, but in a much more contemporary way, right? And we talk about, who are my people? Who are my tribes? Well, tribes collectively create congregations. And that's how the Bible talks about collectives of people, right? Congregations that are made up of different churches, right? There is the body of Christ writ large, right? That is Christians. But then there's the book of, they're the Romans, and they're the Ephesians, and then there are the Galatians, right? Like they're different tribes of people or different congregations of people that make up the people you're trying to activate. I go, that's really interesting. That works really well. Then you've got, well, we want people to evangelize the brand. That comes from the religious text. We're talking about brands being consecrated. That comes from the religious text that we were already using the language, and that became just it made the book so much more easy for me to write from a very personal and vulnerable place. Like I was able to be vulnerable. And that for me, hopefully, is represented in the book. And I like to believe that it's a book only I could write because of that reason. So I'm grateful to those early scholars, and of course the language that they were able to identify so that we could put it in a much more contemporary form today.
Yeah, and you did a great job of it being woven in without it being so in your face. Like I'm trying to, like, because when you look at the first couple of chapters and they have that religious theme, you don't necessarily realize why you're using those until I think maybe like chapter 3, and it hit in my brain. I was like, oh my gosh, now I understand why these chapters are named this, and I understand how these inserting these different references to the Bible and to religion that are helping to paint this picture. And I told my fiance, I was like, yo, I just realized what he's doing, and she was like, oh, that's interesting. I was like, yeah, like it just blew my mind. So I think it's really dope. I think it's really important, and I think it helps you tell that story and write this book in a way, like you said, that only you could write. So like that's pretty dope, and I'm happy for you to be able to do that.
I appreciate that, fam. I mean, it goes back to your earlier question. I do this for my culture.
Yeah, and that's who you are.
My culture. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
That's my culture.
For sure, man. Okay. Huge reason why I was excited and wanted to get you on the show. Obviously, Neptunes Focus podcast. We talk a lot about the music, but Pharrell and Chad together, but a lot more so on Pharrell's side, the cultural impact of those guys, but Pharrell specifically has been enormous. So first of all, talk about your thoughts on the LV show this week, and then kind of like how you feel that adds to this couple decades long of cultural impact that Pharrell has had just in his career.
Man, and it's so his appointment at LV feels like, of course, but of course, right? Like Pharrell has been giving us so many artifacts of fashion with every iteration of Neptunes, Pharrell as his own producer, right? I mean, we're all rocking trucker hats because of Pharrell, right? Like full stop, full stop. And he's always been on the cutting edge of that. And I think that like when I saw the fashion show, which I would state my ignorance, I'm not like fashion isn't like where my expertise lies. But what I thought was super interesting were the people who showed up there to start, right? Reflective of Pharrell's cultural subscription, the infusion of hip hop, the infusion of the predominant Black culture into the work. I thought it's like, I feel like he did us proud, right? And of course, like Virgil Abloh is like, my goodness, another level, right? Another level. But Pharrell, we've seen the evolution for him to get here, right? And I feel like Pharrell has been contributing to the cultural production, our cultural expression, to see a point for decades, that this is just another way by which he expresses his creativity, but this time with the validation, the outside validation that matches what he's always had from the people. So I don't even know him, but I'm so proud of him. And I just feel like, it's like, I feel like one of us has made it in a lot of ways.
Right. I mean, for me, it always comes back to here it is. Like, that's my culture, right? I'm from Virginia, and that's a huge reason why I have so much, admiration for him and Chad and what they've been doing. But rewatching the show yesterday, like, choked me up a little bit at the end. Like, it was beautiful, and like obviously like the music that he composed with the orchestra, but also like that Unspeakable Joy song, which is part of this mission with his uncles, like that whole thing. But then that was the first time the triplets came out, that we've seen them and having that moment, like all of that together. That's a huge part of just, you feel like that's someone that's on a stage that's just like absolutely ridiculous. Like, this is a guy from Virginia, just like me, at the highest level. And also too, like, I'm not a huge fashion person either, right? Like, but I can appreciate all that. There is that one the People King leather motorcycle jacket that he made for Jay-Z. I really do want that. Like, I told my fiance, you got to figure out how to give me that for my birthday month, but that's we have to take out a loan for that. But yeah, man, I think it's just dope, right? Like, I think just the way that he's influenced us in culture throughout our teenage 20s and now 30s is just kind of crazy. Like, people used to call me Skateboard V in college, like, because I was heavy on dunks, and I had a skateboard. I wasn't that good, but that was just part of the influence, right? Like, it's just really dope to see that continue and see all the things that he's done, and for him to be so humble about it is always impressive too.
I mean, I think that, like, I co-sign everything. I mean, your proximity to it is closer to mine, just being from VA. What I think is so interesting about the Pharrell thing is that he's just been the most authentic person, like in the world that he's resided in, right? Like, he's worked with Slim Thug to Mystical to Philly's Most Wanted to, like, I mean, like, man, like, he's been with the hardest of hearts, right, to the cuddliest of cuddliest, right? Like, to the
right.
Timberlakes of the world. But Pharrell has always been Pharrell, right? And I think that there's a level of authenticity that he's been able to demonstrate in, like, his walks of life. And, like, for me, I gravitate so much to him, not only because of his music, but because of his faith also. It's never been something that he has shied away from. He's been very public since we've known Pharrell, which I think is super powerful. And I'm really interested in seeing how the fashion that he displayed at Fashion Week gets reworked into the popular zeitgeist. Right, like how those things, those motorcycle jackets, how those things become the stuff you see on the hangers in the malls, and like, to see that happen, I think this actually may be a level of achievement that we lost Virgil too early on. Like, we got a chance to experience Virgil's work in a very tangible way with Off-White more than we did with Louis Vuitton, just because of the amount of time that he had to do it. Right, and I think that, God willing, Pharrell will be in the helm of this for a while. and to see how it will trickle out into the world. I think it's just another way by which he lives out his ambition.
Yeah, and I think it's a perfect, those guys are perfect examples of just like what our generation and beyond are just going to be built, like focused on like following their footsteps, right? Like there was a person on Instagram, her name was Creating Mackenzie, and she kind of did like a video just analyzing some of the different details and things that she kind of like given her perspective on the show. But she said something that really stuck with me, just kind of talking to the fact that P is such an influential, multi-passionate person,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of like who we all are in this space. Like, right. Like I work in sports marketing, but I got a podcast, right? I talk to a lot of cool people about, but she said, everyone you love is in more than one box. And I think that is just like a perfect, like summation of like perfect description of who we are and who the generation after us is in so much deeper than us and is going to keep taking it even further, which I think is really cool. That's how we should be. I think we should be comfortable with living and operating in more than as many boxes as we can possibly get into, just so we can express ourselves and always feel like we have an outlet to do the things that we love and pursue our passions, which is cool.
I tell my students all the time at Michigan that they should be pursuing portfolio careers. Like if you expect one job to satiate all of your professional ambitions or all of your talents, man, I think that is just preposterous, right? Like, you're engaged. I've been married for going on 11 years. I love my wife, right? My wife is my life partner, right? I love her dearly, but if I expected my wife to be my pastor, my mentor, my homeboy, my collaborator, that would be an unfair burden to put on her. And this is my life partner. How can I expect a company to satiate all of me, right? And I have been of the mind, at least for the last 10 years, at least, that the only way to truly live a life of our fullest fidelity is that you have to be multi-hyphenated. And to your point, all the people that we love, that we look up to, all the bastions of success, they all do multiple things, not just because of the revenue, and that's great, like the income is awesome, but because they just have so much in them that they want to put out into the world, that they want to contribute to the world. And Pharrell is a perfect example of that.
So get into the music, right? Tell us about growing up in Detroit.
Yeah.
What was the first song from Pharrell and the Neptunes, Pharrell and Chad, that you really recognized their sound and you were like, oh my gosh?
Yeah. Oh man. This is what I've been waiting for. Okay. So I think that the first song when I really recognized who they were, who got my attention to me, want to know who they were, was Kaleidoscope, Khalees's first album, and it was I Just Want to Get Along With You. And I was like, yo, what? Like, at the time, I saw, before I got into the world of marketing in academia, I was a songwriter. Like I was a songwriter for like 8 years, professionally for 5 years. And I was like just starting to get into production ish, maybe a year or so beforehand. And when I heard the staccato string line, boom, 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 boom. I was like, okay, that's ill. And then the drum sequencing, the patchwork, and like the attack on the kick and the snare. I was like, yo, what is going on? And of course, the melody was ill. And I was just like, yo, who are these guys? And when I bought her album, that's what we used to do back then. I bought her CD and I went and read the J card. I read the liner notes, right? And I was like, produced by the Neptunes. Who are these guys? And I was like, oh, they did the other song, I Hate You So Much Right Now. And I was like, oh, and they did what for N.E.R.D. And I'm like, okay, all right. Like I'm starting to piece the things together. And then it was Give It To Me. And then it was Shake It Fast. And that's when I saw their faces, right? Particularly on Shake It Fast. And I was like, that's the guy, that guy right there. I mean, I didn't know he was Chad and Pharrell, but it was like him. And then that's when I was hooked. And then this was right around the time, I don't want to get ahead of myself, that I heard the UK version of In Search Of. And I was like, yo, I have to do this for a living. I have to do this for a living, because the way I feel from listening to this music, I have to do that for people. It was intoxicating. Yeah. So it was Kaleidoscope. it just blew my mind. I've never heard anything like that before. And I've been chasing that drug ever since.
Yeah, man. And it's such a like for anyone that wants to criticize, like at that point, all the songs sounded the same. No, they didn't. Like there were pieces, there were instruments, there were sounds that were, definitely consistent or like common between different songs, but like no, just like that was the sound that they came up. Like the fact that Jay-Z said give you bling like the Neptune sound, like that was a good thing. Like
That's right.
it was a good thing that the sound was noticeable and identifiable, and it was able to be something that people could like. That's the brand that the Neptunes built and their production. Like that was important. That had value for sure.
That's right. I mean, and that was a time before producers were getting shouted out by name. So you had to have a tag of some sort, right? Diddy, it was his label, right? So when Diddy be like, take that, like, you know that's bad boy, right? Or Diddy would actually literally say bad boy, right? And the producers didn't have that. Like there weren't like super producers that way. You knew Tim because you knew the drums, the drum pattern. Like by 97, you're like, oh, that's Timbaland, unless it was Missy Elliott and she was shouting out Tim specifically. So you needed a thing to kind of cut through. And to your point, everything didn't sound the same. They just use similar patches. Right. And like, I guess one would argue that those, but like if I'm Quincy Jones and I like a Fender Rhodes and I like this kind of guitar and I use these claps and those kind of drums, would you say all his stuff sounds the same? No, like there's sonic consistency for sure. But the approach, I would argue, was if there were anything the same, it was otherworldly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Until they started pulling it down from the Khaleesi's of the world. And even the N.E.R.D, like that stuff wasn't like right down the middle. But we started looking at Give It To Me, Shake It Fast. I mean, that was like right down the middle.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other important thing that I want to get your input on too is, when you say that you saw Pharrell in the video, like it was also important for me, like for him to be different, right? For him to be very much himself, a little bit weird sometimes, but sometimes a little bit regular, and a regular that was more close to my regular than, the traditional hip hop regular. And I think that was dope for me. What's your perspective on that too?
I feel like I never saw, there's 3 instances that I can remember in hip hop that I felt like I saw myself or like a kindred spirit, if that makes any sense. Like I grew up listening to Native Tongue, right? Tribe Called Quest. And like, well, I loved hip hop, man. I mean, I grew up on hip hop. I loved NWA. Like I loved Eric B and Rakim. Like I loved all the stuff. KRS-One. That wasn't a life I've lived. I mean, I didn't live that life, right? But to hear these guys talk about bringing up a bomb, you got to put me on. Like I could that I relate to, right? And I felt like Native Tongue was sort of like me. I mean, I'm like 9 years old at this time. But then when I saw Pharrell, and I was like, yo, that guy ain't trying to be hard. Right. And like this guy got a sleeve of tattoos. Good night. Like, who is this dude? I don't know about no black guys like that. Right. He's rocking a trucker hat. And like my father worked in auto and he used to bring home those trucker hats with his company, these companies on them. I'm like, dude, I had those hats with the fishnet in the back. This is crazy. Like I just felt like so like, dude, it's possible. It's possible to be you in a world where you feel like you are part of it, but not immersed in it. And then later on, Kanye did that for me, with College Dropout. But yeah, but you're right. Like with Pharrell, for Pharrell to look different than everybody, but feel like he belonged. You went, oh man, yeah, this is different.
That was a big deal. That was a huge deal. So P just turned 50, that's a whole other conversation, which is crazy. But do you have any favorite Pharrell songs or Pharrell features on a song?
Oh, okay. Pharrell songs solo. Frontin'. Does it get better than that? Does it like, I remember hearing Frontin'. This is in 2003, right? Yeah, 2003.
20 years in August.
Unbelievable. Dude, I heard Frontin' and I was like, what am I doing with my life? Yo, because I can never do this. I can never do this at that level. Man, Frontin' is just a perfect record. It's just perfect record. When I think about collaborations, it's hard. I mean, that's a hard one because you got like Pharrell who'll sing like backgrounds, but not like be like featured in it. Like I think like 702, I Still Love You, like Pharrell on the hook. I still love you.
Mhm.
I decided. But I think that like prominent feature, maybe Beautiful.
Yeah.
Snoop, Beautiful.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
That came out that was the same year. That was the same summer. That was the
Yeah,
same summer.
2002, 2003 run is just it's nothing but hits, man.
How Sway? Like how it is unfathomable what these guys were able to do, to be so prolific and profound. Yeah. So I would say if I were putting on today, and not, this is setting aside N.E.R.D. So this is like Pharrell Williams, not N.E.R.D. I would say Frontin' as like his solo joint, and then I would say Beautiful with Snoop as a collab.
Frontin' is just such a beautiful song, man. And when you, because we've talked about Frontin' a couple times on this show, like we did an episode about Jay-Z, like early, like second episode. Like we actually every season we try to do like a versus, or
Yeah.
my partner Vogue, shout out to Vogue, she'll pick someone and I'll pick another person, and we'll kind of pick their best 5 to 7 Neptune songs and see who, like, just go back and forth about them. So we talked about Jay versus Snoop like a couple years ago.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah.
just talking about Frontin' and like that being his first time really singing solo, like not part of N.E.R.D. You got that being on the Clones album. You got Jay-Z comes and give you this crazy 8-bar verse that everyone knows is about Beyonce. The video's got Lauren London in it. Like, there's just so many things about how important that song is. I mean, to see those guys do that last week after the LV show, like 20 years.
And if I'm not mistaken, the leading lady in the video was a dark-skinned woman.
Yeah.
Which is not typical of video vixens, video models at the time. And it was the first song that we had in a very, very, very long time that had a bridge.
Yeah, they're well known for the bridges, man. But the bridge on Front specifically is one of the best. One of the best. Like,
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
But we also always talk about too, like I think Pharrell first brought this up on Drink Champs a couple years ago, is that he wanted to give this to Prince, right?
Yes.
Like, so just the conversation of what if, like, if Prince had it, how would it sound? How would it be different? Will we still have Jay-Z on it? Would that, like, that's one of my favorite questions, is like, if Prince had the song, Jay-Z still be on it? Like, how crazy would that have been? Like,
when I heard the Drink Champs episode, when he said this was supposed to be for Prince, immediately I thought, oh, this is Kiss. Like, if you think about the simplicity of Kiss, right? Which doesn't have a bass line, by the way, which is wild. Frontin' is that. And you go, man, unbelievable. Even that bridge just feels like Michael Jackson. Actually, that boom, 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 boom,
yeah,
boom, 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 boom. That's basically the bass line to Can't Help It.
Right.
Can't help myself if I wanted to. Couldn't help myself, baby, if I could. And and Pharrell's like king of interpolation. So, like, of course he would do that. But yeah, dude, Frontin' is just, and it still stands today.
Yeah.
It still stands 20 years later. You're still putting it on. You go, this the cut, dude.
Yes. Yeah, man. So we talked a little bit about it, Jay-Z versus Snoop. Like, who do you think is either your favorite or the best of the frequent collaborators? Usually it comes down to those two guys, but every now and then someone will pull someone else out of the air.
So here's what I'd say. And I actually, today, and it may change later. I mean, man, this is a tough one, because on one hand, you want to go, oh man, the clips, like, clips. You get a completely different Pharrell with the clips. Like, there is Pharrell with everything, and then there's the clips, dude. And it's just like, dude, what? I mean, forget like grinding. Let's set it aside. But like, Hell Hath No Fury, that entire album, dude. Hello, New World, here we go on that. Like, what? Like, the bag that he's in with those guys are just unparalleled. But
yeah, we got to talk about, they got that new song, which has got the internet ablaze right now.
No, man, throwing shots at your boy Jim Jones. This is at least the what was thought of to be subliminals. But I think that the Pharrell, let's go to Neptunes, the Neptunes that I love the most is probably the best demonstrated on Justified. When I think about Take It From Here, I think about Senorita, Like I Love You. Man, even though those records were supposed to be for Michael, except for Like I Love You, they wrote that specifically for him. But like, to get those records with Justin on them, with majority live instrumentation, it's Pharrell on drums, right? Chad on guitar, live strings. I think it just, what it does is it actually goes like to the earlier point about people saying they have a similar sound. It takes away patches and just looks at composition and production, and orchestration. I mean, they have live strings on Take It From Here. Crazy. When I heard that album, that's when I literally just like to like time out for a moment. And I was like, I'll never be able to do that. Like, I'll never, ever be able to do that. And that was the first time I started to doubt, like, am I going to do this music thing for a living? Because I'm nowhere close to that. I mean, I felt like I had to like close my computer for a moment, but it made me, inspired me to want to be better. That album, man, I just think that like it was just such a pivot. It was such an inflection point for those guys, because they went from being producers as we know them, from like hip hop and popular R&B music, to being Quincy Jones like producers. And that, man, it's just man, I love those. I love that. I love that. Love that.
Yeah, for me, like my favorite song out of their songs on Justified is Last Night. Just the way that like the bop, like just the energy of that one is beautiful. And just watch, if you have the time, if you haven't already, like, they've got that whole documentary on the YouTube. Have you watched like that?
I had the DVD. I bought the DVDs on eBay back in 2005. Oh yeah, fam. And what was crazy town, is that like you see them making it, which is just ill. We saw Pharrell reference all the vocals for Justin, and like every single lick. I mean, Justin performs it better than Pharrell, but they're Pharrell's ideas, right? And the demo for Like I Love You is Latrell, who's just a monster. Good night, Latrell, just a beast. I think about like House Party. There's a house party that's going on tonight.
Yeah, shout out to my one of my boys that's on the show a couple times. My boy Steve. He always talks about the trail, like House Party. It's another one. Infatuation. There's another. We also just discovered there's a version of a song called Dirty Girl.
I know Dirty Girl.
That has an early T.I. verse on the remix.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that was like just.
Yo, you know who's like a huge Neptunes head that you probably need to go to the show is Corey Towns.
Corey, if you're listening, bro, come on the show, man. Like,
I'll connect you. That's my guy. That's my guy.
He literally met my partner Vogue at an event in DC 2 weeks ago, and they talked. So I got to follow up and get him on the show. But yeah,
Corey, man, he got all the crates, dude, all the crates. But
yeah, because him and the homie Niles went through and did that whole discography project.
Yeah,
like, I had Niles on the show last summer. So let's stick with Justin Timberlake real quick. If that's your vote for the best frequent collaborator, what do you think about Man of the Woods?
When I heard Man of the Woods as a body of work, it's like, come on, Justin. But the Pharrell and Chad records are strong. And I guess like me, so that's actually a good push, because their collaborations have been frequent enough to be called a frequent collaboration. That's a fair push. So I'll go with my original then. I'll go with the Clips.
See, like we had a whole episode about Man in the Woods. I think it was probably earlier this year for the 5-year anniversary. And the conclusion, just to sum up the whole episode, the conclusion that we came up with was that album was for Justin. It wasn't for us. It was about him being in love with Jessica Biel. They just had their son, and their son's name is Silas, which translates actually to Man of the Woods, which is why it's called that.
Okay.
But that's the theme of the album. But in the moment it didn't hit. But like I listened to it a lot to prepare for the episode, and songs grew on me. Obviously, with it being mostly Pharrell and Chad and Timbo and Danger, like I got to give it a shot because those are my guys from Virginia. And like there are songs on it that grew on me that when I first heard them, I was like, what? But then it made sense when I had the context of it being an album about being in love and being, celebrating, going back to your roots of him being a country boy from Tennessee. Like, that makes sense. And it's like, if you re-listen to it with that lens, you're like, all right, some of these are cool. Like, I get it. But by no means is it better than Justified. It doesn't touch Justified. I mean, apparently he's back in the studio with both. So we're get new music. Can't wait for that. But
I mean, like I'm an R&B guy, so like I love to see people singing on Neptunes records or Neptunes tracks. But I think that's a body of work. Man in the Woods just didn't hang together very well.
I think it was, it was also like the first song was very, I don't know. You gotta go if you have time, listen to us talk about it. I think one last thing on that is like Vogue made a really good point is that us knowing he's from Tennessee is not the same as us being prepared for an album where you're taking us back to the woods, right? Like if but showed us that a little bit more, like he kind of eased into it with the 2020 experience and having the Tennessee kids that had a little bit of bluegrass to go with the soul elements, but like not in the way that he dropped us off at the cabin with the Man of the Woods. Like, it was a little bit too abrupt of a change. But last question. Talked about how much you love N.E.R.D. So talk about what's your favorite N.E.R.D album?
Yo, N.E.R.D is my favorite band, full stop. Like it's over the Beatles, it's over Earth, Wind, and Fire, it's over the Roots. Like I love N.E.R.D. Love, 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 love N.E.R.D. because it meets at the convergence of all the things, all the cultural production I grew up on, hip hop, R&B, rock and roll, even some little indie. Like it's like all the stuff, electronic, all the things in the most perfect distillation of their convergence. The best album. It's hard. I think I got to go with Fly or Die, and I'll tell you because I think that they learned from In Search Of, which is a perfect album. In Search Of is perfect. Fly or Die is perfect too, but the MIDI version of In Search Of was not great. The live version with Spy Mob, killer. So they realized that like, oh, the songs come to life in a far better way live than they do through MIDI. And that's what we got with Fly or Die. But the song selections are just they're so vast in the production, in like the spaces that they cover, from like Drill Sergeant to She Wants to Move to Jump to Maybe. It's like, come on. Then you got Chariots of Fire. Like, come on. Like the spectrum of diversity in that album is just unparalleled. From two dudes from Virginia, where you get rock and roll singers with Pharrell on it, and that makes a lot of sense. You get rappers on it with Pharrell and Chad. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like everyone had a role. Like Shay had a role. Like everything just made sense on that album. And I think I played it a million times over. However, In Search Of, so that's my favorite one. That's the one that's like, but In Search Of had the biggest impact on me because I'd never heard anything like that before in my life. I think I probably bought this is not hyperbolic, maybe 35 copies of that. So I just give it to people. Like, yo, I was like, yo, you have to hear this. You have to hear this. I mean, I'd be in a car with someone and be like, yo, what is it? Like, N.E.R.D. here, take the CD, take it. I'll buy another one, take it. Like, you need this. And that's how it was with Frank Ocean too.
It's weird.
Which would make for an honorable mention for frequent collaborator, by the way, Frank and Pharrell.
Oh man. Like,
I mean, is there anything doper than Pink and White?
I mean, when you tell people who don't know that there's Beyonce vocals at the end in the background, people's minds are just like, excuse me? Like,
is there anything doper than that, than Pink or White? And 6'8", no less. Come on, man.
Just the vibes of that. So for me in there, so first of all, one of my favorite songs that you did mention on Fly or Die is The Way She Dances. Like that, the energy of that is just like, just two-step, give me a glass of champagne, just kicking it. Like, I love the way she dances. Like whenever I have people have this conversation, like I never remember what I say and I never stick to it. Like some days my favorite is Fly or Die. Some days my favorite is Seeing Sounds. Like I think in Search Of, because it was first, the impact, and so I don't think I've ever talked about this before too. I realized that I heard In Search Of the original version because I downloaded it. That's like I was what I had CD burner, so I had all those songs. I don't think I heard the Spy Mob version until like at least 3 or 4 years later.
That's how long it was. Yeah, I think the MIDI version came came out maybe in
They only
2000,
came out, I think they came out like a year and
2001.
a half apart, but I
Yeah,
think it wasn't like a big repush because like I think
no,
Lap Dance had been out forever and
that's
like
right.
had the video. So I wasn't like I knew it, but I didn't have like when I went back and got the Spy Mom version, I ran that album years later, like it was like it just came out. And I was like, yo, this is absolutely amazing. The songs on there are so important. Run to the Sun. Oh my
I was
God.
literally just about to say Run to the Sun,
To the Sun,
Bobby James, What's Wrong with Me?
man. It was just like
My only beef though, not what's wrong with that was my beef. That What's Wrong with Me is not on that album.
I think I know which one you're talking about because there's a lot of those Lucy's that are out there. Because like, there's another one.
It's on the best of N.E.R.D album. It's on
Okay,
that
yeah,
best
yeah,
of
yeah.
collection. But What's Wrong with Me should have been on that. But it's a Stay Together. That's the song I was thinking about. Stay Together. It's just
The
so
other
good.
one that's a Lucy, I think that was around that time is Locked Away. Locked Away is dope. Like,
So I heard Locked Away live.
whew,
When I
Locked,
first heard it, I was like, yo, what is this?
Locked
Boom,
Away.
boom, 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 boom,
And that's
boom.
another thing is like Locked Away's got that's incorporated into all the albums is the Sky influence. Like Sky
Yeah,
is
that's right.
I grew up with my shout out to my cousins who are like my sisters, Janine and Rachel. Like I grew up with them. And I really like I want to just take a moment to really give them a lot of love for how much they have shaped and influenced my musical taste because they're from PG County, but
Okay.
our moms, we would swap weeks in the summer where we do a week in Richmond and then we do a week in Maryland. And I would just be with my two girl cousins watching music videos all day. They're very different in their musical tastes. So like I'm watching Hot Like Fire, Aaliyah, and like, yo, I'm in love. I'm watching like I always tell people because of my cousin Janine, the older one, I can rap every verse from that. The Ladies' Night from the with
Missy Elliott.
yes, with
Yeah.
Angie Martinez
Oh,
and
what a night. You should be like Mrs. Being like
Mike.
Mike. Yeah.
That video came on the box like every day one week that summer. But then my cousin Rachel had me listening to No Doubt. So
Hmm.
like I'm just a girl, Sunday morning,
That's right.
spider webs, like, and you hear and like that putting me on to like realize what ska music is. And like, oh, ska music has these like Caribbean influences that like, come on, man. Like that, just the like you said, the different types of music that get poured into these albums from these guys and when they do an N.E.R.D project is just such an amazing way and again it speaks to the representation that we get from these guys who are just like they just love the music.
I grew up listening to the Monkees as a
Mm.
kid. I loved the Monkees. As much as I loved Tribe Called Quest, I loved the Monkees. And when I heard In Search Of, it was the first time that I felt that music represented in the music that I was most associated with, like R&B and hip hop. I was like, these guys get it. These guys get it. Like Run to the Sun. These guys get it.
Yeah, we just did the 15th anniversary episode for Seeing Sounds, and Vogue brought up a good point that she gets inspiration from the Monkees and bands like that when you hear the song Windows on Seeing Sounds.
Yeah.
Like it's the way that the drums,
Mm-hmm.
like, that's very like and the epitome of that kind of era, that music that was out there in that time, man. It's like
I really appreciate the Seeing Sounds albums. I feel like that was their most experimental
mm-hmm,
while yet feeling like N.E.R.D. I
mm-hmm,
think the album after that, what was the one where he's with the headdress?
nothing.
Nothing. Yeah, there you go. Nothing. I felt like I don't listen to right now because
Yeah.
like I don't know what this is.
Yeah, nothing was definitely the most disjointed, I think.
Yeah, of
I think there were some label issues. They're just trying to get that over with. And again, like if we're fans, so there's songs in there that there's like that I appreciate that I enjoy.
course.
But nothing is like it's just not cohesive as the first three. The first three were just very like we're gonna try this. Okay, I think we figured it out. Let's get better. And then nothing was like, all right, we just got to do this. Like, let's just get it done.
Oh man.
But yeah, man, I think Seeing Sounds just the way I don't know. Seeing Sounds is always gonna be special to me, like because of the time is like right when I graduated from college, and just
Yeah.
like there's a lot of different themes and motifs of the album that kind of were parallel to my life at the time. That I was just like, okay, yeah, this is it.
I remember it came out the summer of 2008, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was working at Apple at the time, and working at Apple was just like, it was a dream come true for me. And I remember, like, somehow or another on my iPhone, the shuffle would always get to happy.
Mm.
Now I'm happy, things are looking good now. And I just felt like, man, it was so, that whole summer just felt like that album for
Yeah,
me.
yeah. That's funny. We talked about that on the episode, and someone said it on Twitter too. It's like people don't even remember that happy. They just know that the other happy, which is
Like,
like we've talked about this on the show before too. Like that's the other happy is not a bad song. It just got played way too much,
yeah,
man. That's what
yeah,
happened. Got a song that touches the kids. When the kids
that's right.
like feel it and it's a song that the kids can enjoy, then the kids are going to sing it and they're going to want to hear it, and you're going to play it to keep them quiet and to help have them chill out. Like we always do this thing. Everyone does it in college athletics where they have a game, probably at a men's or women's basketball game, where they have a bunch of school kids come. Like
Yeah.
I'll never forget playing that in 2000, I guess 2014 maybe, and just like having 3,000 elementary school kids just up and clapping. Like, yeah, the song was powerful, man. And it's not a bad song.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear it anymore.
There's a TikTok of someone. I guess he had the stems for Happy. They had the backgrounds, and it's showing the stacking with Kim and Janelle Monáe on the chorus. The harmony is just unbelievable. Like you said, it's a really good song.
Yeah.
Really well produced. It's really well orchestrated. It's really well arranged. And then for it to catch on with kids in that way, it's like you just gotta let it go, man. You just gotta let it go.
Bro, great conversation, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Before I let you go, anything you want to talk about, anything you got coming up, tell people where they can get the book.
Yeah, man. So I mean, I am full steam ahead on the book. I think it is important for practitioners for sure, but it's also important for creators, right? Creators often put things in the world, and when they try to describe the impact or why it's important, it's hard for it to translate in a commercial setting, right? I'm trying to get a brand to sponsor my podcast. Like, how do I communicate why this is important? And we have to say, because it's important to the culture. What does that mean? All right. And it's like, because it's cool. Well, what does that mean? And the hope is that the book provides language, the Rosetta Stone, for us to talk about these things that are intangible, that are omnipresent, that are abstract, that we could talk about in a way that not only helps us lubricate our conversations in our daily lives, but also in our commercial dealings. So my hope is that the book makes a broader impact than just marketing. So I ask folks to go check it out, give it a shot.
Thank you so much, man. We'll have to figure out another way to get you on the show. Like if anything comes up, I might have to call you. And there's something that we're working on. I might need to get your feedback on. We'll talk offline about that. But
so I would love to be back on the show. I mean, I feel like there's so much that we can explore that I'm sure you already have on the podcast, but there's like the hidden gems that we don't talk a lot about, like the 702 cuts. Like, why didn't those things take off like they should have? Like, there's so many things. There's so many things. So glad to be a part of the show, and I look forward to any opportunity to join you.
Yeah, man, that's the great thing about the show, and where I think the show and what I get the pleasure I get out of this labor of love is like, it's so many conversations can be started from here, and that they can go in a million different directions. Like,
right.
You never know where it's gonna go, what other artists are gonna end up talking about, what other cultural, phenomenon or other thing that Pharrell or Chad or someone from Virginia might have touched. Like, it can go on forever. So maybe it will, maybe it won't. We'll see.
There's so much more, man. There's so much more, dude. You start talking about the people that influence them, like Stereo Lab. Like, there's just so much. There's so much.
Yeah, man. I mean, we started talking about Steely Dan last episode.
Steely, that's right. That's right.
Yes, man. It's so many different ways it can go. So many different ways. Thank you so much, man. Good luck with everything, with the book. Everyone, you should go read it. I'm reading it. I'm not finished, but if you need questions, or if you have questions about it, if you want my perspective, like, hopefully this is enough cosign, but go check it out. Everyone, I appreciate you guys listening so much. Everyone that likes and subscribe to the podcast, catch us on Apple and Spotify. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Neptune Sunday Podcast. Catch you next Neptune Sunday. Peace and love.
Peace.